Ela Moreau made a last-minute decision to surprise her millionaire husband in the city, expecting nothing more than a warm embrace and a quiet afternoon together. With her hands resting over the small swell of her belly, she smiled at the thought of telling Nathan, finally sharing the news that they were expecting their first child. But instead, she stumbled upon a sight that shattered her reality. Nathan Moreau, standing in the middle of a busy plaza, holding another woman in an intimate embrace. The moment stretched endlessly, her breath catching as Celeste Laurent's delicate fingers trailed across his chest. A wave of nausea hit Isla, not just from the shock, but from the fragile life growing inside her. In an instant, everything she believed about her marriage began to unravel. If you're drawn to stories filled with betrayal, heartbreak, and the unrelenting grip of karma, keep reading, because Isla's journey is just beginning. She had always been a believer in love, raised in a quiet countryside town in northern France, where family meant everything. Wealth and power had never been Isla's ambition, but when she met Nathan at an exclusive investor gala in Paris, her world shifted. He wasn't like the other self-absorbed millionaires who strutted through the room, flashing their success. When he approached the registration table where Isla was assisting a friend, his eyes held genuine curiosity. He didn't talk about himself. Instead, he asked about her dreams, her passions, her life. They married a year later in a breathtaking ceremony at a vineyard in Bordeaux. The air was crisp with the scent of lavender. Their friends toasted to a love that seemed unshakable, and Ela felt like she had stepped into a dream. Moving into Nathan's penthouse overlooking the Seine was an adjustment, but the sweeping views and the elegance of his world mesmerized her. Nathan thrived in his role as the founder of a prestigious consulting firm, hailed by business magazines as an unstoppable force in the industry. But beneath the shimmering surface, Isla began to notice the cracks. Nathan's work consumed him. He was in London on Monday, Dubai by Wednesday, and back in Paris for high-stakes meetings by Friday. At first, she admired his ambition, proud of the empire he was building. To occupy her time, she threw herself into philanthropy, organizing fundraisers, volunteering at shelters, and even considering starting her own nonprofit. Nathan encouraged her, though from a distance. He sent her flowers when she least expected it, booked luxurious spa retreats at Le Meurice, and planned extravagant dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants whenever he was in town. It was enough. At least, that's what Isla told herself on the nights she fell asleep alone. But now, everything felt different. With her pregnancy, she had hoped Nathan would slow down, that they would finally focus on building their family. But instead, his absences stretched longer. His excuses grew thinner. And for the first time, she felt truly alone. It started with the missed calls, then the late arrivals, and then, on their wedding anniversary, Nathan showed up 2 hours late, murmuring something about an urgent meeting. He was there, sitting across from her at the candlelit table, but Isla felt like he was 1,000 miles away. She tried to ignore the unease creeping into her heart, convincing herself that his world was simply demanding. But standing in that plaza, watching him with Celeste, she realized the truth. She had been lying to herself all along. Nathan closed million-dollar deals effortlessly, always maintaining his polished composure. Despite his demanding career, he still found ways to be thoughtful, sending Isla flowers when she least expected them, arranging luxurious spa days at the peninsula, and whisking her away to candlelit dinners at Le Meurice whenever he was in town. Most nights, she fell asleep convinced that he was working hard to secure their future. She ignored the creeping loneliness that sometimes settled in the pit of her stomach. But as time passed, the illusion began to crack. The small moments of distance became harder to ignore. Nathan started answering her calls with clipped responses, if he answered at all. Then, on their wedding anniversary, he arrived 2 hours late to dinner, his excuse wrapped in a practiced apology about an important business meeting that had run long. He was there, sitting across from her, but Ela could feel the space between them stretching further than ever before. His mind wasn't with her at the table. It was tangled in spreadsheets, acquisitions, and endless phone calls. Their grand penthouse, once a home filled with warmth, now felt like a beautifully furnished hotel where she was nothing more than a temporary guest. She reminded herself that high-powered careers came with sacrifices, that this was just a phase. But deep down, a whisper of doubt took root, growing stronger with every unanswered text, every missed goodnight, and every trip he took without inviting her. Weeks before that fateful afternoon, Isla had an unsettling dream. In it, she saw Nathan in a faceless crowd, walking away from her, hand in hand with someone she couldn't recognize. She reached out, calling his name, but he never looked back. When she awoke, her heart was pounding, her hands clammy. Over breakfast, she mentioned the dream to him, hoping for some reassurance. He merely chuckled, brushing it off with a quick kiss on her forehead. "Just a dream," he murmured before shifting the conversation to his upcoming trip to London. Isla forced a smile, but the unease remained. Nathan had never been cruel or dismissive, not outright at least. In many ways, he was the man she had fallen in love with. He was generous, thoughtful. When their elderly neighbor fell and broke her hip, Nathan covered her medical bills without a second thought. When a friend's nonprofit needed funding for a children's literacy program, he wrote a check with no hesitation. That selflessness had once been part of why she adored him. So why couldn't she shake the feeling that something was wrong? Sophie Dubois noticed the change in Isla before she even voiced it. Over brunch at Café de Flore, their usual weekend tradition, Isla found herself absent-mindedly stirring her cappuccino, lost in thought. Sophie frowned. "Are you okay?" Isla hesitated before admitting, "I don't know. Nathan's always busy, but lately something feels different." "Something feels off," Sophie said gently, stirring her coffee. "Maybe you should surprise Nathan at his office or travel with him on one of his business trips. Sometimes seeing someone in their work environment makes things clearer. You'll either realize he's genuinely busy or find the answers you're looking for." The idea lingered in Isla's mind. She had rarely visited Nathan's office. He always insisted it was chaotic, not exactly a place for her. But maybe it was time to see his world firsthand. That evening, over dinner, she mentioned her plan. "I was thinking of dropping by your office tomorrow," she said casually, cutting into her salad. "I'll bring lunch, meet some of your team." Nathan, mid-slice of his steak, froze for just a fraction of a second before forcing a polite smile. "Oh, I'd love that," he said, perhaps too quickly. "But tomorrow's completely packed, back-to-back meetings. Maybe the day after?" Something about the way he responded, the slight stiffness in his posture, sent a ripple of unease through her. But she didn't push. "All right," she said, keeping her tone light. "I'll come by on Wednesday, then." He gave a curt nod and returned his focus to dinner, but Isla barely tasted her food. Beneath their routine conversation, she felt it, a storm gathering, a hidden truth teetering on the edge of exposure. She wanted to believe Nathan was still the man she had married, but her instincts whispered otherwise. Wednesday morning arrived with a gray sky stretching over Paris, the clouds pressing low over the skyline. Isla woke early, a mix of determination and apprehension buzzing inside her. She selected her outfit carefully, an elegant beige cashmere sweater, tailored navy trousers, and low-heeled pumps. It was polished but not overdone, the perfect balance between sophistication and ease. After a quick breakfast, she hailed a car and arrived at Moreau & Associates just before noon. The sleek steel and glass building loomed above the bustling streets, a symbol of power and precision. She had only been here twice before, once for its grand opening and another time when she surprised Nathan with a birthday cake. Stepping inside, she moved through the modern lobby, its contemporary design marked by abstract art and minimalist decor. The scent of freshly brewed coffee lingered in the air as sharply dressed professionals hurried past. A poised receptionist, her dark hair swept into a neat bun, greeted her with a professional warmth. "Mrs. Moreau, welcome," she said with a polished smile. "Mr. Moreau is currently in a meeting, but I'll let him know you're here." Isla nodded, forcing a calm expression, but as she took a seat in the waiting area, a flicker of doubt settled in her chest. She had expected Nathan to be in his office. If he wasn't, then where exactly was he? The receptionist, Camille Rousseau, greeted Isla with professional warmth. "Mrs. Moreau, what a pleasant surprise! Mr. Moreau is currently in a meeting, but I'll let him know you're here." Isla nodded, trying to steady the unease rolling in her stomach. She took a seat in the waiting area, her eyes flicking around the high-traffic corridor. Employees moved with purpose, clutching laptops and stacks of documents, their faces taut with concentration. The environment pulsed with urgency, deadlines, deals, pressure. She wondered how Nathan thrived in this relentless whirlwind. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Camille reappeared, her smile tinged with awkwardness. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Moreau, but Mr. Moreau seems to be running late from an off-site meeting. We haven't been able to reach him yet." Hila's pulse quickened. Nathan's schedule was meticulously structured. She had expected him to be at his office by now. "I see," she said, forcing a polite smile. She decided to wait a little longer, hoping he would return soon. Another 15 minutes slipped by. Still nothing. Camille approached again, an apologetic expression on her face. "Perhaps you could try calling his cell phone?" Her voice was gentle, as if it were completely normal for the CEO of a major consulting firm to be unreachable. Hila nodded, stepping away to dial his number. Voicemail. She typed a quick text. "Hey, I'm at your office. Thought we were meeting. Everything okay?" 10 minutes later, still no response. A prickle of unease crawled up her spine. She tried to rationalize, maybe he was stuck in traffic, or a client meeting had run over. But as much as she wanted to dismiss it, a darker thought gnawed at her. What if he wasn't working? She exhaled slowly, thanking Camille before heading toward the elevators. The air inside the office felt thick, as though it held secrets she wasn't meant to uncover. But today, she wasn't going to ignore her instincts. Stepping onto the bustling street, she inhaled the crisp Parisian air. Something inside her whispered that if she looked hard enough, she would find the truth. A newfound determination settled in her bones. She raised her hand to hail a taxi, giving the driver an address she never thought she'd need to visit alone. Nathan's favorite hotel bar, a place where he often conducted private business meetings. If he was there, she'd find him. And if he wasn't, she would keep searching until she had the answers she needed. The drive across the city felt endless, each traffic light dragging on like a taunt. She pressed her hands against her lap, trying to steady her breath. Her mind replayed every missed call, every late-night meeting, every lingering doubt she had ignored for months. By the time the taxi pulled up to the grand entrance of the Hotel Royal, her heart was pounding. Whatever truth awaited her inside, she was ready to face it. The taxi ride felt endless, each stoplight stretching time unbearably. The distant hum of Parisian traffic faded as Isla's mind replayed the subtle signs, the late nights, the hushed phone calls, the growing distance between them. She placed a protective hand over her stomach, trying to steady her breathing. Stress wasn't good for the baby. With each passing block, her heartbeat quickened. "Almost there, madame," the driver said as they approached Hotel Royal, a lavish establishment known for its private business meetings and discreet, high-profile clientele. Nathan often held investor lunches there. At least, that was what he told her. Stepping out onto the sidewalk, she instinctively pulled her coat tighter against the autumn breeze. A sharp pang coursed through her abdomen, brief but enough to make her pause. The grandeur of the hotel loomed over her, its marble pillars and golden accents gleaming under the city lights. She entered the opulent lobby, where chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting warm reflections on the polished floors. The lounge was nestled to the right, separated by frosted glass panels. Through them, she could see suited executives murmuring over half-empty glasses of wine and scattered documents. A sleek bartender stood behind the counter, preparing an old-fashioned with meticulous precision. She scanned the room for Nathan's familiar frame. Nothing. For a fleeting moment, relief washed over her. Perhaps she was overreacting. Maybe he really was stuck in meetings. "Bonsoir, Madame Moreau," the bartender greeted, recognizing her from past visits. "Looking for Monsieur Moreau?" Hila swallowed hard, her forced smile barely concealing her nerves. "Yes. Has he been in today?" The bartender pursed his lips in thought. "Oui, earlier. He left about 30 minutes ago with a small group." He hesitated before adding, "I believe they moved to the sidewalk cafe outside." A wave of nausea surged through Hila, her stomach twisting, not just from anxiety, but from the growing life inside her. "Merci," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Pushing through the heavy glass doors, she stepped into the crisp evening air. The courtyard cafe was framed by towering buildings, white umbrellas shading small tables where professionals lingered over espresso and quiet conversation. And then she saw him. Nathan sat at a corner table, leaning toward a woman with auburn hair cascading over her shoulders. Celeste Laurent. They weren't just talking. There was something intimate in the way Celeste's hand brushed against his arm, the way his gaze lingered on her face. Ila's pulse thundered in her ears, drowning out the soft hum of city life around her. Her breath hitched, and she felt a sudden, sharp pressure in her abdomen. She gripped the edge of her coat, willing herself to stay calm. The baby. She had to stay calm for the baby. She took a cautious step forward, not wanting to cause a scene. But as if in slow motion, Celeste rose gracefully, stepping around the table, and then, without hesitation, she slipped her arms around Nathan's neck. Celeste's arms draped around Nathan's neck, her body pressing close as if no one else in the world existed. Nathan responded instinctively, his hands resting at her waist, their faces just inches apart. The sounds of clinking cups and murmured conversations faded. A sharp cramp pulsed through Ila's abdomen, stealing her breath. The ground beneath her shifted, her stomach twisting violently as a fresh wave of nausea hit, stronger than before. For a split second, she hoped she was mistaken, that maybe her mind was playing cruel tricks on her. But the scene before her remained painfully clear, her husband holding another woman, looking at her in a way Isla once believed was reserved only for her. A strangled noise escaped her lips, barely more than a gasp, but it was enough. Nathan's head jerked up, his eyes locking onto hers. Horror rippled across his face, his entire body stiffening as if caught in a crime he never expected to be witnessed. Celeste must have sensed the change in him because she followed his gaze, turning slowly to face Ila. The confident, poised expression she had worn just moments before shattered into something closer to panic. A storm of emotions raged inside Ila, disbelief, fury, heartbreak, but beneath it all, a deep, primal fear gripped her. The stress, the adrenaline coursing through her veins, was it harming the baby? She wanted to run, to disappear before the weight of betrayal crushed her completely. Instead, she stood frozen, her breath uneven, her vision blurring at the edges. Her pulse pounded so hard it felt like her body was no longer her own. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Nathan moved first, breaking away from Celeste so abruptly that he nearly knocked over his untouched coffee. "Isla," he started, his voice cracking. She flinched at the sound of her name. For weeks, she had imagined telling him about the baby, hoping it would bring them closer. Now, the thought of sharing something so sacred with him felt like a cruel joke. She forced herself to take a step forward, each footfall echoing in the courtyard. The cafe had gone almost silent, a few curious patrons stealing glances at the unfolding drama. Isla's gaze flickered between Nathan and Celeste, her chest rising and falling rapidly. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, laced with quiet fury. "What is going on here?" Silence. Nathan opened his mouth, but no words came. He looked like a man searching for an escape, struggling to form an excuse that could somehow undo what had already been seen. Celeste shifted uncomfortably, her fingers curling around the strap of her designer handbag. Isla could practically see her calculating the best way to retreat. Ila squared her shoulders, ignoring the lingering ache in her abdomen, a sharp edge creeping into her voice. "I asked you a question." Celeste glanced at Nathan, as if expecting him to handle it, but he remained motionless, shame darkening his expression. Realizing she wouldn't be able to slip away unnoticed, Celeste straightened. "This isn't what it looks like," she said, though even she didn't seem convinced by her own words. Isla let out a hollow laugh, shaking her head. "Then why don't you tell me what it is?" Instead of responding, Celeste muttered, "I should go," hastily reaching for her purse. But before she could slip away, Ila stepped in her path, arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Wait," Isla said, her tone sharp as steel. "You clearly know my husband. I'd like to hear exactly who you are before you disappear." A faint blush crept over Celeste's cheeks. She shot a quick, desperate glance at Nathan, who remained silent, his expression unreadable. "I'm Celeste," she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. She smoothed down the front of her sleek black blouse, her professional demeanor faltering under Isla's piercing stare. I'm his business associate." A cold, bitter laugh escaped Isla's lips. "Business associate? Since when do business associates hold each other like that?" Celeste's face tightened with guilt. It's not what you think, she stammered. We've been working on a project together, we got close, but… Stop. Isla cut her off, lifting a trembling hand. Don't insult me with more lies. I can see exactly what's going on. She turned to Nathan, whose face had gone pale. He stood motionless, as if paralyzed by the weight of his own betrayal. How long? Isla demanded, her voice quivering with a mix of fury and heartbreak. How long have you been doing this behind my back? Nathan exhaled shakily, his shoulders slumping under the weight of regret. Isla, please, he pleaded, his voice barely above a whisper. His eyes darted around, aware of the watchful glances from cafe patrons. Not here. Let's talk somewhere private. A strangled sob caught in Ila's throat. Private? She repeated, the words slicing through the air like a blade. You're the one who chose to do this in public, Nathan, so why not talk about it right here? She gestured around them to the small crowd that had begun to pick up on the tension. A few people quickly looked away, pretending not to eavesdrop, but the damage was done. Nathan took a step forward, reaching for her arm, but she recoiled. I'm sorry, he breathed, his voice laced with guilt. I never wanted you to find out this way. The weight of his words crushed her. Is there ever a good way for a wife to find out her husband is cheating? She asked, her voice breaking. Do you even understand what you've done? Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't break here. Not in front of them. Celeste looked as though she wished the ground would swallow her whole. Isla's instincts screamed at her to leave, to run before the pain consumed her completely. Without another word, she turned on her heel and pushed past Nathan, ignoring his desperate call of her name. The city air hit her like a shock, the noise of Parisian streets a blur in her ears. Her world had just crumbled, but somewhere deep beneath the heartbreak, a fire had ignited. She refused to let this define her. Nathan had made his choice, and now he would face the consequences of his betrayal. Whatever came next, she vowed that she wouldn't be the one to suffer in silence. The streets of Paris blurred around her as she walked aimlessly, the crisp autumn air biting at her skin. She hadn't brought a coat, but the cold barely registered. The only thing she could feel was the image seared into her mind. Nathan in Celeste's arms, his expression caught somewhere between guilt and longing. The scene played on repeat like a broken film reel, each frame twisting the knife deeper. She wasn't sure how much time had passed when she finally found herself in front of Sophie's apartment. The door opened before she could even knock. Sophie took one look at her, tear-streaked, disheveled, eyes hollow, and pulled her into a tight embrace without a word. Inside, the warm glow of the apartment was a stark contrast to the icy turmoil swirling inside Isla. She sank onto the plush couch, barely registering the half-empty cup of tea on the coffee table, the faint hum of music playing softly in the background. Sophie sat beside her, eyes filled with concern. What happened? The words tumbled out between ragged breaths. The cafe, the intimate embrace, the look in Nathan's eyes that had shattered everything. I couldn't breathe. Isla whispered, her fingers twisting in her lap. He was right there, holding her, like I never existed. Sophie's jaw tightened. That's despicable. Her voice was laced with anger. To do something like that so publicly? What the hell is wrong with him? Isla let out a broken laugh. I don't know. I don't even know what to do next. She buried her face in her hands. Do I go home and confront him? Do I wait for an explanation? Or do I just leave? Sophie reached out, her hand warm against Isla's shoulder. First, breathe, she said softly. You don't have to make a decision right now, but whatever you do, you're not alone. The hours slipped away as they talked, Sophie patiently listening, letting Isla unload the weight of her heartbreak. At some point, she made tea, then later ordered sushi, coaxing Isla to eat a few bites. Eventually, the conversation turned to practical matters. Her penthouse, their shared finances, the very real possibility of separation. He doesn't just get to do this and pretend everything is fine, Isla said, her voice steadier now, a flicker of anger cutting through the devastation. Sophie glanced at the clock. It was nearly midnight. Do you have somewhere to stay tonight? Isla shook her head, slowly. She had no desire to see Nathan after what she had witnessed, but the thought of leaving him alone in their home, spinning whatever false narrative suited him, made her stomach twist. In the end, she refused to run. The penthouse was just as much hers as it was Nathan's, and she wouldn't let his betrayal push her out. No matter how painful, she had every right to return home. She hugged Sophie tightly before leaving, whispering a promise to update her on whatever happened next. Wiping her eyes, she stepped into a cab, the short ride back to the penthouse feeling unbearably long. Her hands trembled in her lap, her phone buzzing inside her bag. She didn't check it. She wasn't ready to hear whatever feeble excuses Nathan had for her. The doorman greeted her with his usual polite nod, unaware of the storm she carried inside. She stepped into the private elevator, the walls closing around her as she ascended to the 40th floor. When the door slid open, she was met with silence. The penthouse was dark, except for the faint glow from the city skyline. Isla took a slow, steadying breath before stepping inside. Had Nathan made it back before her? She wasn't sure. But the real question was, how would she handle the inevitable confrontation? She knew one thing: she wouldn't cower. The eerie quiet unsettled her as she walked through the foyer, her footsteps echoing against the marble floor. On any other night, the soft flicker of ambient lighting would greet her, maybe the distant hum of the television if Nathan had returned from work late. But tonight, the space felt abandoned, like a museum of a life she no longer recognized. Her eyes flicked to the large clock above the fireplace. Nearly 1 a.m. Exhaustion tugged at her, but sleep was impossible. Normally, she would have taken a warm bath or curled up with a book. All she felt was raw, exposed, like an open wound that refused to close. Then, the sound of keys rattling at the front door sent a jolt through her. She turned, pulse spiking. The door swung open, and there he was. Nathan looked wrecked. His tie was askew, his shirt wrinkled, his usually composed expression clouded with exhaustion and something else: guilt. His bloodshot eyes met hers, and for a moment they simply stared. "Isla," he said finally, voice rough, uncertain. She lifted a trembling hand, cutting him off. "Don't." The single word was nearly a whisper, but it carried enough weight to silence him. His expression crumpled, regret flickering across his face as he took a hesitant step forward. "I never wanted you to find out like this," he admitted, voice strained. "It's complicated." Her breath caught, fury rising like a wave. "It's not complicated, Nathan," she snapped, her voice sharp. "You cheated on me. You lied. You've been." Isla's voice caught on a sob as she wiped at her tear-streaked face. "I trusted you." Nathan swallowed hard, his gaze flickering to the floor. "I won't deny what you saw," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But it wasn't just meaningless." She let out a bitter laugh, her chest tightening. "Not meaningless? That's your defense? Celeste and we've been working together for months," he continued, his voice strained. "It started innocently. Then things escalated." "Innocent?" Isla's voice cracked as she gestured toward the memory of their public embrace. "You call that innocent?" He winced, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "You humiliated me," she continued, her anger rising. "If there were problems in our marriage, you could have come to me. We could have talked, gone to counseling, anything. But instead, you decided to betray me." Nathan's shoulders sagged. "I know I handled this terribly. There's no excuse," he admitted. "Celeste and we got carried away. It wasn't about you, it was about me, about feeling overshadowed, the pressure of everything." She let out a sharp breath, shaking her head. "That's your excuse? A midlife crisis?" Her voice rose, the fury in her chest burning hotter. "Do you have any idea how that looked? To me? To everyone who saw you?" He reached out instinctively, as if to comfort her, but she recoiled before his hand could brush her skin. "Don't touch me," she hissed, her body trembling. Tears finally broke free, spilling down her cheeks, but she refused to let them weaken her. "You destroyed our life together," she whispered, her voice raw. "And now? I have no idea what to do from here." For a moment, all Nathan could do was bow his head, the weight of his shame pressing down on him. "I'm begging you to let me explain. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this," he said, his voice barely steady. She took a shaky step back, wrapping her arms around herself as if to shield what was left of her heart. "Right now, I just need space," she murmured, wiping at her damp cheeks. "I can't share a bed with you. I can barely stand being in the same room." Nathan opened his mouth as if to argue, but no words came. Instead, he nodded numbly, as though he understood this was the one thing he couldn't fight. Without another glance, Isla turned and walked toward the guest bedroom, a room she never thought she'd need. The moment she locked the door behind her, the weight of everything came crashing down. She collapsed onto the bed, muffling her sobs into a pillow. Despite the luxurious surroundings, everything felt hollow, irreparably broken. As the night wore on, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the truth of his betrayal replaying in her mind like a cruel, never-ending nightmare. Each of them was now confined to separate rooms in what was once their shared life. The heartbreak throbbed like an open wound, refusing to heal. If Nathan thought he could talk his way out of this, he was sorely mistaken. The days that followed blurred together. Isla avoided him as much as possible, waking early to leave before he stirred and returning home long after he had retreated to his study. She spent hours wandering the streets of Paris, finding solace in quiet corners of the city, letting the crisp autumn air clear her thoughts. But avoidance wasn't a solution, and no amount of distance could erase what had happened. Inside the penthouse, tension thickened the air like an unspoken accusation. Their conversations, when they happened at all, were reduced to polite exchanges about household logistics, the cleaning service schedule, the arrival of deliveries, never the truth that loomed between them. On the rare occasions they crossed paths, Nathan looked as though the weight of guilt was physically pressing down on him. His normally composed expression was strained, his posture slightly hunched as if expecting an attack. Rumors of his indiscretion had already begun circulating. Sophie had mentioned that a friend of hers had been at the cafe that day, had seen everything. The story had traveled through whispered conversations at charity events and business gatherings. Isla became painfully aware of the sympathetic glances, the hushed voices that stopped the moment she entered a room. High society thrived on gossip, and now she was at the center of it. But what caught her off guard was the strain she noticed in Nathan's business. She overheard phone calls where his usual confidence was absent. Words like damage control and fallout were murmured behind closed doors. One evening, unable to help herself, Isla lingered near his study, listening as his voice came through the door, low but urgent. "I understand their concerns," he said sharply, "but personal matters shouldn't interfere with the deal. We'll finalize the contract by next week. Just assure them I'm still their point of contact." Moments later, he stepped into the hallway, looking exhausted. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, neither of them spoke. "Trouble in paradise?" Isla asked, her voice laced with quiet bitterness. Nathan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Some investors heard about the incident." He hesitated, then admitted, "It doesn't paint me in the best light. They're worried about stability." "Or your credibility," she corrected, swallowing down the resentment tightening in her throat. "It's hard to trust a man who cheats on his wife and can't even manage his own personal life." A flicker of pain crossed his features, but she felt no satisfaction in seeing it. "Isla, I'm trying to fix this. I've already reached out to a counselor. I'll sign up for therapy, anything. Please, just believe me." She wrapped her arms around herself, stepping back. "Are you trying to fix it because you truly regret what you did, or because your business is at risk?" The question landed like a blow. Nathan's face twisted in pain. "Both," he admitted quietly. "I regret hurting you more than anything, but I can't pretend my reputation isn't also on the line." Isla's chest tightened. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to think that guilt, not self-preservation, was what drove him now. But the image of him in Celeste's arms was burned into her mind, and the whispers of scandal spreading through their social circle only fueled her anger. "Then you have a lot to prove," she said, turning away. That night, lying alone in the guest bedroom, she stared at the ceiling as the city lights painted shifting patterns across the walls. Could she ever trust him again? Outside the walls of their penthouse, the consequences of his betrayal grew heavier. The rumors hadn't faded, they had only gained momentum. And as Nathan's business wavered under the weight of scandal, Isla couldn't shake the feeling that karma had begun its slow, inevitable reckoning. A week slipped by, each day filled with strained silences and the occasional late-night argument that ended in exhaustion rather than resolution. Despite her best efforts to ignore it, curiosity gnawed at her. Who was Celeste Laurent? How deep did her connection with Nathan really go? Isla knew the blame belonged to Nathan, he was the one who had made the choice to betray her. But unanswered questions left a gaping wound in her sense of closure. One evening, after Nathan left for a business meeting, she found herself in his study, fingers hovering over the neatly arranged files on his desk. She hesitated, then reached for a thick folder labeled Celeste Laurent. A sharp pang of guilt stabbed at her. This was an invasion of privacy, but desperation outweighed hesitation. As she flipped through the documents, her heart pounded. Contracts, emails, travel itineraries, the details of their professional relationship laid out in ink. But was there more hidden between the lines? The door creaked open. Isla froze, pulse hammering. She braced herself, expecting Nathan to appear. Instead, a middle-aged man with neatly combed hair and a well-tailored suit stepped inside, a briefcase in hand. Etienne Morel, Nathan's head of finance. A man who had been with the company since its early days. Surprise flickered across his face. "Madame Moreau," he said, clearing his throat. "I didn't realize you were in here." Etienne cleared his throat, stepping further into the room. "I was just looking for some documents Nathan requested. My apologies for disturbing you." Isla forced a small, composed smile, gripping the folder tighter. "It's all right. I was just tidying up," he nodded, placing his briefcase on the desk. "He told me I could grab the financial reports from his study. I hope that's okay." She hesitated, then nodded. A sudden curiosity burned inside her. "Of course, Etienne, but can I ask you something?" Her voice was measured, but she could feel her pulse quicken. Etienne paused, adjusting his cufflink before meeting her gaze. "Certainly, if it's within my capacity." Isla inhaled sharply. "You've worked with Nathan for years. Has he ever mentioned a relationship with one of his associates, Celeste Laurent?" A shadow passed over Etienne's expression. His eyes flickered toward the folder in her hands, and for a moment, he seemed to weigh his response. "I'm not sure what would be appropriate to say, Madame Moreau," he said carefully. "But I can tell you that Mademoiselle Laurent was brought in as a consultant to expand our firm's marketing strategies. She's quite capable." Isla pressed her lips together. "Capable," she repeated softly. "Capable at marketing, and apparently much more." A bitter sigh escaped her. "I'm sorry, Etienne, I don't mean to drag you into this." A flicker of sympathy crossed his face as he set down a stack of reports. "If I may speak frankly," he said, lowering his voice, "I have great respect for Monsieur Moreau, but I've disapproved of this situation for some time." He hesitated before continuing. "While I never intended to involve myself, I inadvertently became aware of their personal entanglement. It was not my place to interfere, but I worried it would end badly." Emboldened by his candor, Isla asked, "Do you know how long it's been going on?" Etienne exhaled through his nose, his jaw tightening. "A few months at least," he admitted quietly. "But I will say this, Mademoiselle Laurent was quite strategic in forging a connection with him. She used her position to gain his trust, and some of us suspected her motives weren't entirely professional." A sharp ache tightened Ila's chest. Months. He had been lying to her for months. She swallowed hard, forcing down the lump in her throat. "Thank you, Etienne," she whispered. "I appreciate your honesty." He inclined his head. "You deserve better, Madame Moreau. And if this scandal escalates, I can assure you the board will not look kindly on Mademoiselle Laurent's methods." Isla absorbed his words, her mind swirling with thoughts of the rumors, the business fallout, the way Nathan's professional reputation was beginning to fray at the edges. It seemed Celeste's relentless pursuit of power might have cost Nathan more than just his marriage. The damage Celeste had inflicted extended beyond Isla's marriage. Her influence reached into Nathan's business as well. As Etienne left, his words lingered, solidifying a realization that sent a new surge of resolve through her. This wasn't just about heartbreak anymore. Nathan wasn't the only one at risk of losing everything. If he allowed Celeste to manipulate him further, both his career and reputation would crumble alongside their marriage. And Isla refused to stand by and watch it happen. Fueled by betrayal and clarity, she decided she was done playing the passive victim. If Nathan wouldn't offer full honesty, she would force the truth into the light. The opportunity presented itself the very next day. His laptop sat open on the dining table. An email displayed on the screen. Isla hesitated before glancing at it, her pulse quickening as she read. "Meeting with Celeste at 2 p.m. to finalize marketing strategy." Ritz-Carlton Lounge. Her jaw tightened. The subject line alone was damning. This time, she wouldn't stumble upon them by accident. She would catch them on her own terms. At precisely 1:45 p.m., Ela arrived at the Ritz-Carlton Lounge. The elegant space was bathed in warm lighting, the soft hum of a piano drifting through the air. She had dressed with intention. A fitted black dress beneath a sleek trench coat, her hair swept back into a polished chignon. She was no longer the tearful wife shattered by betrayal. She was a woman who refused to be played for a fool. Her gaze swept across the lounge until she found them. Nathan and Celeste sat in a quiet corner, their heads bent close as they perused a stack of documents. The familiarity between them sent a fresh wave of anger through Ela, but she steadied herself. This time, she was in control. Drawing a slow breath, she straightened her shoulders and strode toward them, ignoring the curious glances from other patrons. Celeste spotted her first. The color drained from her face, her fingers tightening around the stem of her wineglass. She shot a panicked glance at Nathan, who looked up just as Ela reached the table. He stood so abruptly that he nearly knocked over his coffee. "Isla," he said, his voice strained with alarm. "What are you doing here?" She tilted her head, lips curving into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I could ask you the same," she replied smoothly. "Discussing marketing strategies, are we?" Her gaze flickered to Celeste, who remained frozen, her grip on the documents rigid. Nathan exhaled sharply, scrambling for an explanation. "We're finalizing some proposals," he said, voice unsteady. Ela arched a brow. "Oh, because from where I'm standing, it looks like something else entirely." "This is business." Nathan's words might have sounded convincing if guilt weren't written all over his face. Celeste quickly regained her composure, smoothing her blouse as she turned to Ela. "Ela, I'm sorry for the misunderstanding. We didn't expect." "Spare me." Ila's eyes flashed with fury. "I know exactly who you are and exactly what you've been doing with my husband." She shifted her focus back to Nathan, her expression unreadable. "You told me you'd do whatever it takes to fix this," she said slowly. "And yet, here you are, with her. Again." Nathan lifted his hands in a placating gesture. "Ela, I swear, this is a professional meeting. We're finalizing her consulting contract. After you found out, I ended the affair. Celeste understands that." Celeste's jaw tightened, her frustration breaking through her carefully curated poise. "Yes," she interjected, her voice clipped. "We've discussed it, and Nathan and I have agreed to keep our relationship strictly professional moving forward." Ela let out a sharp laugh. "A little late for that, don't you think?" She kept her voice low, but there was no mistaking the steel beneath it. "Professional relationships don't involve embraces in public cafes." Celeste squirmed, her eyes darting around at the other patrons, now shamelessly eavesdropping. "We never meant to hurt you," she said, her attempt at sincerity falling flat. A heavy silence settled over the table, broken only by the distant clink of silverware. Nathan reached for Ila's hand, but she recoiled before he could touch her. She had come here to see if his apologies were more than empty words, to see if his actions aligned with his promises. And from the suffocating tension in the air, it was clear they did not. "Let me make this very clear," Ela said, her voice steady but laced with quiet fury. "Either this meeting ends with a complete severance of any personal relationship, or I walk away from this marriage. I won't tolerate another betrayal." Nathan exhaled shakily, his eyes flickering to Celeste for the briefest moment. "It's over," he said, each syllable carrying the weight of finality. "Whatever existed between us ended days ago. This meeting is strictly about finalizing her marketing deliverables. I swear to you." Celeste swallowed, nodding stiffly. "Yes, we're just finishing the final transition documents. That's all." Ela scanned them both, her chest tightening. She wanted to believe him, to believe that this was truly over, but trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt in a single conversation. She leaned in, her voice trembling with emotion. "I hope, for your sake, that's true," she murmured. "Because if I sense even a hint of deception again, Nathan, I'm done. No second chances." Without waiting for a response, she spun on her heel and walked out, her heart pounding. She wanted to run, to cry, to scream. The lounge door clicked shut behind her, and Ela exhaled a shaky breath. She hadn't found the closure she had hoped for, but she had drawn a line. One more lie, and the life they had built would collapse for good. In the days following the tense confrontation at the Ritz-Carlton, a fragile calm settled over their marriage. Nathan insisted he had cut all ties with Celeste, assuring Isla that their relationship, both personal and professional, was completely over. He started coming home earlier, skipping the usual networking dinners, and making an effort to engage in her life again. For a brief moment, Isla allowed herself to hope. At his request, she agreed to attend counseling sessions with him, exploring whether trust could be salvaged. But much like a wound that had barely begun to heal, their marriage remained fragile beneath the surface. While the social gossip had begun to die down, the business fallout lingered. Rumors of Nathan's indiscretions had shaken investor confidence. Several major clients had delayed or pulled out of contracts, wary of potential instability. Even suppliers, once eager to secure deals with Moreau and Associates, hesitated, concerned that the CEO's personal scandal hinted at deeper corporate issues. Behind closed doors, Nathan's board of advisors began demanding more transparency. They were questioning not only the firm's financial health but also whether Nathan's personal entanglements had compromised his leadership. One evening, Isla found him in his study, surrounded by stacks of reports, his usual air of confidence replaced by something she rarely saw in him: unease. "Everything okay?" she asked gently, stepping inside. Nathan looked up, exhaustion etched across his face. "The board is threatening to strip some of my discretionary powers if we don't recover this quarter," he admitted. "They're also reviewing Celeste's expense reports, trying to determine if any of our interactions blurred ethical lines." Isla's brow furrowed. Were there questionable expenses? Nathan exhaled heavily, rubbing his temples. A few business dinners that may have been personal. Some hotel stays filed under work trips. Things I should have been more careful about, but... His voice trailed off before he sighed. "I never thought we'd get caught." His words stung. Not that he regretted doing it, just that he had been caught. "I see," she said quietly. Nathan must have sensed the shift in her expression because he quickly added, "I regret all of it, Isla, but right now I need to focus on salvaging what I've built. If the board loses confidence in me, the company could suffer irreparably." For the first time in weeks, Isla saw him not just as the man who had betrayed her, but as a man watching his entire world crumble. She wanted to be supportive, but the weight of betrayal still pressed heavily on her heart. Isla cleared her throat, carefully choosing her words. "Then be honest with them. Own your mistakes. Lying or denying will only make things worse." Nathan's eyes darkened with remorse. "I know. I'm doing everything I can, but it feels like my life is unraveling at every seam." Isla stood still, torn between the urge to comfort him and the instinct to keep her distance. She had spent years being his anchor, but now she wasn't sure if he deserved that from her. She hesitated before stepping closer, resting a tentative hand on his shoulder. "Then do what's right. Not for me, not for the board, but for yourself. Stop hiding." He covered her hand with his grip uncertain, his voice trembling. "Thank you," he whispered. I know I don't deserve your kindness after everything." She gave him a small, sad smile. "Kindness is all I have left to give you right now. Whether there's anything more beyond that, we'll see." Leaving him to his documents, she walked through the silent corridors of their home. The walls felt hollow, the memories of what they once were echoing in every corner. She ached for the marriage they had lost, but deep down she knew some things might never return to the way they were. Karma had begun its slow, inevitable reckoning, not just in their personal lives, but in business as well. Nathan was trapped in a storm of his own making, and she wasn't entirely convinced he grasped the full extent of the destruction. Still, she sensed the worst was yet to come. Fate always demanded its due, and Nathan's debts were stacking up. The summons arrived on a gray afternoon. A formal notice, sealed in an embossed envelope, sat waiting on the foyer table, delivered by a company courier. Isla picked it up, turning it over in her hands before breaking the seal. An emergency board meeting. The statement inside was brief but ominous, citing serious allegations and the urgency of resolving them. The date was set for the following morning. That evening, Isla returned from her volunteer shift at the youth center to find Nathan pacing the living room, gripping the letter in one hand and his phone in the other. His face was tight with dread. "They're not waiting until the quarter's end," he said, voice unsteady. "They want answers now." He exhaled sharply. "They suspect corporate funds were misused during my affair. Celeste was billing personal expenses to the firm." Hila's heart clenched, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Is there any truth to it?" Nathan sank onto the couch, rubbing his face. "A bit. She used a corporate card for some of our dinners. I never explicitly approved it, but I didn't stop it either. That alone might be enough for them to claim negligence, or worse, fraud." Isla lowered herself into the chair across from Nathan, folding her arms protectively. "So the board meeting is tomorrow." He nodded, his jaw tight. "Yes, I have to prove that I can fix this. Maybe reimburse the company out of my own pocket, possibly step down from certain leadership positions." His voice cracked slightly. "I never thought it would end like this." Isla inhaled deeply, steadying herself. "You still have a chance to own up to your mistakes. That might help." Nathan glanced at her, a mix of desperation and gratitude in his eyes. "Will you come with me?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Stand by my side?" Her heart twisted. Part of her wanted to watch him face the consequences alone. Another part still remembered the man who had once guided her through the complexities of Parisian high society, the man who had always supported her philanthropic work without hesitation. "Fine," she said at last. "I'll go. But don't mistake my presence for blind loyalty. I need to hear the truth myself." Relief flickered across his face, though it was laced with apprehension. "Thank you." The following morning, Isla dressed in a tailored navy suit, pulling her hair back into a sleek bun. Outwardly, she looked like the poised, confident wife of a corporate mogul. Inwardly, her nerves were fraying. Nathan donned a crisp gray suit, his face drawn, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. They rode in silence to the towering glass skyscraper that housed Moreau and Associates. Upon arrival, they were escorted to a large conference room where the board members sat in a tense semicircle. The air crackled with unspoken judgment. Documents were spread across the table, expense reports, flagged transactions, potential violations of company policies. Isla scanned the room, feeling the weight of the scrutiny, the silent condemnation. Nathan took his place at the head of the room, clasping his hands together to keep them from trembling. When he spoke, his voice was steady, but not unaffected. He acknowledged his failures, how he had allowed professional and personal lines to blur, how Celeste, though initially hired for marketing, had taken advantage of their closeness. He admitted to his own negligence, failing to scrutinize expense reports, failing to maintain the professionalism expected of him. Then, with measured sincerity, he offered a solution. He would repay every disputed charge, step down from select committees, and work to rebuild the board's trust. The room remained silent, the weight of his words hanging thick in the air. The board members listened in silence, their expressions unreadable. Then, the questioning began, a relentless barrage of inquiries, each sharper than the last. They demanded timelines, scrutinized his relationship with Celeste, and insisted on receipts for everything from hotel stays to extravagant dinners. Nathan did his best to answer, though his voice wavered at times. Occasionally, his eyes flickered to Isla, searching for support, but she remained still, offering nothing. Finally, the chairman cleared his throat, his tone grave. "Mr. Moreau, your negligence has exposed this firm to both legal and reputational risks. We will deliberate on the appropriate course of action. Please wait outside." Nathan swallowed hard and nodded. Without a word, he and Isla stepped into the corridor, the tension between them palpable. They stood side by side in silence as the minutes stretched into eternity. The quiet hum of conversation from inside the boardroom was muffled, but every now and then a sharp voice pierced through, making Nathan flinch. At last, the door creaked open. A board member gestured for them to return. The chairman delivered the verdict without ceremony. "Effective immediately, you are relieved of your CEO duties, pending the outcome of an internal investigation. You may retain a minority stake in the company, but your authority is significantly reduced. Additionally, if further evidence emerges that you knowingly allowed Mademoiselle Laurent to misuse company funds, legal action may be pursued." A heavy silence fell over the room. Isla let out a quiet breath, her pulse racing. Nathan remained motionless, absorbing the blow. After a long pause, he spoke hoarsely. I understand. With that, they left the room, walking through the corridors of what was once his empire. Inside the elevator, he finally turned to her, his eyes glassy with unshed tears. "It's over," he whispered. "Everything I built, gone." She hesitated before resting a tentative hand on his shoulder. "You're still here," she said softly. "That counts for something." Outside, Paris moved on, indifferent to Nathan's fall from grace. The city's rhythm continued uninterrupted, oblivious to the collapse of the empire he had once ruled. He stood on the sidewalk, gripping Isla's arm as if steadying himself. Neither spoke, uncertain where they stood, professionally, personally, as a couple. Their shared future dangled in uncertainty, demanding answers neither was prepared to give. In the weeks that followed, life in the Moreau penthouse changed in ways Isla had never imagined. The once busy phone lines fell silent. Invitations to elite galas ceased. Colleagues who once fought for Nathan's attention now kept their distance, eager to avoid the stain of scandal. Financially, Nathan wasn't ruined. He still had savings, properties, and investments. But losing the CEO title, the identity he had poured his soul into, left him adrift. Nathan spent his mornings in the penthouse library, scrolling through job listings or making discreet calls to old contacts, searching for a way back into the corporate world. But his usual confidence was gone, replaced by something unfamiliar: humility. For the first time, Ayla saw it in his eyes, an understanding of the damage he had done. As for Celeste, the rumors suggested she had left Paris entirely, likely to escape further scrutiny. Isla felt a hollow satisfaction in knowing that chapter had closed, yet it did nothing to quiet the question that lingered in her heart. Could she truly forgive Nathan enough to stay? One crisp afternoon, after a marriage counseling session, they walked in silence through the winding paths of Luxembourg Gardens. The golden hues of autumn leaves swirled around them, crunching softly beneath their feet. It was a far cry from the life they once lived. Chauffeurs, black-tie galas, nights spent in exclusive lounges. Now they walked side by side, not touching, but still tethered by something fragile and unresolved. Eventually, Nathan broke the silence. "I know an apology isn't enough," he said, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. "But I need you to know, I'm sorry. Every single day, I regret what I did to us. The mistakes I made in business and our marriage, there's no excuse." Isla tucked her hands into her coat pockets, a storm of emotions battling inside her. "I appreciate you saying that," she replied, her voice steady but quiet. "But it still hurts. I replay that moment, the two of you, over and over in my head." Nathan's face twisted with guilt. "I understand," he said. "I know trust doesn't just come back overnight. I'm prepared to keep working, for as long as it takes." They stopped by the edge of the pond, watching as ducks glided effortlessly across the water. Isla inhaled deeply, trying to make sense of what she wanted. She wanted to believe in redemption, to believe that people could change. But she also remembered what betrayal had felt like, the hollow ache, the sharp sting of humiliation. Finally, she turned to him, her eyes glistening. "I want to give us a chance," she admitted. "I do still love you, but if we rebuild, we start from nothing. No more secrets, no more illusions. Honesty, complete transparency." Nathan's throat bobbed as he swallowed. His eyes moistened as he reached for her hand, holding it gently between his own. "I accept that," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll earn your trust, step by step." For a long moment, they stood there, frozen in time, as the world around them continued to move forward. And for the first time in a long time, Isla allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could too. Life rarely offered neat endings. Nathan's downfall marked the closing of one chapter, but perhaps the start of another. One where humility and truth could reshape him into a better man. In that quiet, leaf-strewn corner of the park, Isla and Nathan made an unspoken pact to try. Love was a fragile tapestry, and theirs had been torn apart. Whether the pieces they stitched back together would hold was uncertain, but for the first time, honesty was woven into every thread. Thank you for following Isla's harrowing journey as she uncovered her husband's betrayal, confronted the mistress who threatened her marriage, and witnessed the collapse of an empire built on secrecy. Through heartbreak, anger, and the faintest glimmer of hope, she chose to face the pain head-on, demanding truth, reclaiming her dignity, and finding the strength to shape her own future. If this story moved you, please like share, and subscribe for more gripping tales of love, betrayal, and redemption. Your support helps us continue exploring the raw complexities of human relationships and the unexpected ways karma reshapes destinies. Stay tuned for more stories that stir the heart and challenge the soul.